End of day. I heard the food was pretty good because I fed my goat as well as part of it. So hopefully we'll keep it short. We'll keep it to the point for everybody to get some value. I do want to keep it an open discussion. So if you have any feedback or questions during the presentation, let me know. We'll try and keep it more of a discussion-based approach. So first off, data governance. How many folks here are on the security side and security operations? Okay, and what about compliance and audits and more on the senior leadership side of things? Or manager and above? Yeah, a few people. Okay. So what I wanted to do, and you bear with me, it's a journey, is kind of talk about not so much the speeds and feeds of technology and the value that it brings to a security operations team or risk mitigation technologies. It's more around what does our business care about? What do they actually do with the systems that we're trying to support and secure? And that's really where I'm going to focus on how we can help our business actually drive more revenue, make more money, i.e., give us more budget on the IT side and funding so we can go for the cool technologies and implement new and leading edge analytics and digital transformations and all those buzzwords. So first off, the other piece, of course, are there any privacy people in the room? No, okay. So this is attempting to be holistic because privacy and legal are other areas that we don't really talk to on the security side. However, they have, they wear suits. They have the visibility at the senior level that sometimes our security teams don't have, and they can be a good champion to help us get our messaging across to at the end of the day, get more funding to mitigate risks. And if we have that holistic story of privacy, security, compliance, it really helps drive our messages across. How many people are dealing with SaaS or cloud environments at this time or transformations? Pretty much everybody, right, at this time. So that's great. There's a ton of business value in moving to the cloud. There's every business, if they're not looking at it today, just the value of reducing your administrative costs, moving all of that administrative maintenance, that additional overhead is significant enough that every company, if they're not looking at it today, will be in the near term. I'm sure it's on everyone's roadmaps. 56% of businesses also for risk mitigation have more than one type of cloud CSP, cloud service provider, whether it's Azure or Google, AWS, etc. And this just creates a nightmare from a security standpoint. On top of that, from a business value, there's the security issues. We're sharing our crown jewels, we're sharing data, we're sharing information with people that cloud environments. Data residency may help keep that information within Canada, but you don't know who's accessing that data. That cloud, at the end of the day, is servers on someone else's premises. So there's third-party risks. On top of that, there's compliance drivers. There's, at the global level, we have GDPR. I'm assuming most folks have heard of GDPR, which is a European privacy standard. Too many times, maybe? Yeah. PIPEDA is our local standard as well. That's another one that, although it doesn't have teeth today, there's a lot of push to update it. I think the last revision, so the most recent revision actually has mandatory breach notification. That was November 1st of last year. However, I don't think it's been touched for quite a number of years, maybe even over a decade now. Right? But there is privacy implications, there's risks, there's people who will be class action lawsuits, etc., that will impact organizations. So it's a real risk that needs to be factored in. And CISOs, of course, are aware of it. They're trying to secure clouds while they haven't even had time to secure their on-premises. They don't understand what's going on in their environment. Business Unit A is deploying their own cloud initiative and deploying their own systems, whereas Business Unit B has their own systems going as well in parallel. Different vendors, different contracts, different SLAs, no background checks because security requirements weren't provided up front because security wasn't looped in, right? There's a lot of risk, basically, and that's either increasing the amount of risk, or if security is at the table because they come in at the end, they might be saying no to digital transformation, and we all know the bottom line is what counts, so the business is going to move forward, even though there's that much risk associated with these transformation initiatives. Tying into that, not going into it, covered it, lots of privacy regulations globally, so if you're covering more than just one area, even if you don't, well, one thing is we don't always know if we're an e-commerce organization, we don't know where our customers are coming from. So that's a big risk because there are privacy regulations that are applying to citizens to protect their personal information. And on top of that, of course, PIPEDA has its own requirements that need to be adhered to. And basically, you're juggling compliance, privacy, 20 different privacy requirements. There's PCI regulations in there too. So it's a lot. It's a very landscape that the security world doesn't really touch on. But your services provide support to. Oh, there is some issues there. Okay. Their services provide your services as security practitioners provide support to adhere to these compliance regulations. The other thing, getting into crown jewels. So now this focus is really around confidential information, personal health information. It used to be you had your employee badge, maybe you had your first name and your last name and your email address, and that was enough for companies to do what they needed to do. For marketing initiatives, employees, maybe the employers had your social insurance number, but that was about it. Now, organizations know your first name, your last name, your date of birth, where you've lived for the past 10 years. I mean, the government is included in this discussion, but your personal health information, your financial records, your credit report, right? That's a ton of information. And unfortunately, we as organizations, so that's putting your customer hat on. Now putting your organization or your employee hat on, we don't really understand where that data is within our own environments because business units are doing their own thing. So we need to have a way of A, understanding where the data is, and B, putting the correct controls in place, as well as record retention, which is, again, not really security, but all of that plays the picture of risk reduction in an organization. And again, there's a ton of value with moving into this analytics, moving into this personal information, gathering the data. I don't think there can be any argument that there's a ton of value. The analytics, the money, the additional services that companies can provide to their customers because they understand what their habits are, what their spending habits are, is invaluable. However, we need to do it in a secure fashion. And tying into that, of course, there needs to be a single way of doing this. It can't just be point solutions for, okay, this organization's doing one initiative for marketing. This organization needs to understand their customers' purchase habits for another reason. It needs to be a single approach across the organization and that's scalable. So as your organization grows, it grows with you. So what does that exactly mean? Really, it's a single framework for protection. Really, it's identify the data through an automated way. The days of spreadsheets and doing privacy impact assessments with a template of paper based on interviewing is good, and there's value in it. However, given the scale of growth, the explosion of different initiatives, throwing in that analytics buzzword, there's a ton of information that privacy teams, security teams can't keep up with. So now, leveraging the power of automation, leveraging the power of auto discovery, identify the sources wherever it is, whether it's in a data lake, whether it's on-prem, whether it's in the cloud. At least understand where the risks are, understand where the crown jewels are, and that's something that security and privacy really needs to align with, and compliance as well. Classifying the data is kind of the next step in the process where the data is identified, it's assigned a risk value, whether or not it's personal information, personal health information, or not required anymore. So is it redundant information? Is it obsolete? Can it be removed from the environment? So these are big discussions, but putting them in the foundation start, as always, something even when you get into your personal habits, right? Creating a habit is hard to start, but once that foundation is there, it's a lot easier to maintain after that initial pain of investing, working up front. Then the next step is applying policies. So it's going to be it'll be automated, so you don't have to worry about doing this manually every time a new system comes into play. It's automatically discovered, it's automatically policies applied, and then you don't have to worry about manually. It's more of a check-in after that. It's more of a health check versus an implementation or deployment. Thank you. So tying into that, 5 steps. Identify your data, analyze the data, govern, act, and secure. So tying into all of that, where does security specifically come into play? Really, it's at every stage of the game, because it should be an approach that everyone's on board with. At senior level, right down to the analyst, they understand where their crown jewels are for an organization. What does your business really care about? This is really the most valuable conversations that we have with customers, is where completely outside of technology. It's what does your business do? What do you see as, where are you looking to go? Where's your roadmap? And then translating that into what are the IT risks associated with that, and how can those risks be mitigated? And again, it's a standard approach across the board. I don't want to get into too much of this for everyone, because I know it's been a long day already, but starting out, do an assessment, understand your data. There's interviews involved, there's systems deployed, but leveraging technology software to support those initiatives is an easy way and a repeatable way to do that across the organization. The defensible disposition, again, once the data has been identified, organizations that we've talked to, up to 70% of their data can be removed because it's redundant, it's obsolete, or it's outdated. So that information can actually be reduced. There's been breaches. I won't name any specific recent breaches, but data that's been around from 2010, 2000 that was just there because people didn't even know, and I've worked for some of those companies before, so they didn't even know that they had the data just because they didn't understand their environment. And that's with privacy and security, just having oversights and not really being able to automate all of the discovery activities in their environment. Policy-based governance, again, once the team understands, once the groups understand what the data is, where it is, apply the policies, whether it's for privacy, whether it's PHI. Again, even in Canada, there's 4 different personal health information regulations. There's PIPEDA, overarching all of that across all of customer information. Are there any questions at this point in time? Tying into that, of course, what we really care about, breach prevention, right? So all of that information, all of that data is really nice, but how do we protect it? Now, there are different approaches. It depends on who you talk to, it depends on your preferences. There could be the point solution, endpoint protection, monitor the endpoints, monitor anything going in or out of your organization. There could be the approach of monitoring the back end. Every system that contains information is monitored. There's a criticality assigned to it. It's really dependent on the organization and how they address this. But if it's in my name, but if it's a strategic approach to doing it versus an ad hoc approach, it really it can be standardized, and that approach can be applied across the organization. And of course, tying into that, crown jewels are really data. So great, compensating or mitigating controls are great, but why not go right into the data, protect the data itself throughout its life cycle? It doesn't have to be data at rest, not data in transit, but the data fields itself. first name, last name, social insurance number, credit card information. Protect those fields within the database. Protect those fields as soon as they're collected, right at the web application, right within the API, encrypted throughout the remainder of the life cycle. It can be encrypted and decrypted for those who need to actually access the data. So that's kind of a newer approach. It definitely removes a lot, and it reduces some of the spend as well. So it's not an additional defense and depth strategy. It reduces the spend because you don't need to secure your databases per se anymore. You could reduce that because all you cared about securing in the first place was that personal information or that personal health information. So tying into that, and where the privacy story comes into the play, GDPR, again, specifically calls it out. There's other regulations in the US who are starting to talk about it more. Canada, the Privacy Commissioner's Office acknowledges that this technology is around, although the process usually takes a little longer than expected to kind of implement changes and updates to their regulations. However, data-centric security, pseudonymization is the term. So if you're not familiar with it, it's really keeping the format of the data, but it's encrypted using AES 256 encryption. That's kind of the gist of it. Forget about it's the same security controls that are applied at the database level, but specifically within the fields. And anonymization, of course, but the data at that point in time is considered valueless. Pseudonymize the data, you can leverage it for analytics, you can leverage it for all of you don't break any applications, but at the same time, you're still secure, and that data, if it was, assume breach is kind of the term that everyone likes using, if that data is exfiltrated out of your environment, it's still secure, it can't be decrypted. I'm going to skip through that one. I want to leave it open to conversations, but the big story is it's out there. Organizations are seeing value in it. Now, does Micro Focus in itself have some of these technologies? Perhaps. We can talk about it at the booth, but there's a ton of value in it. There's different components, there's different modules, whether it's unstructured or unstructured data. That's really where you want to focus. And identify the data, understand where it is, and there's various components. If you want to start baby steps along the way, that's generally the safest bet. A new data initiative, then our new cloud migration project, that's where you want to focus as a starting point, versus trying to boil the ocean, because those projects are generally unsuccessful. And at the same time, your compliance, security, privacy are all in alignment. They understand their information. They're getting nice and valuable reports and data around their own personal initiatives. And I'll close it off with, over and above the privacy and compliance initiatives, Micro Focus overall has a few different technologies that might help along the way with overall breach defense. And I'll leave it at that. So might there be any questions for me? Sure.
You talk about the separation between security and privacy as two distinct functions. At least in my organization, are you seeing that happening more often, or is it still in most organizations still separate entities?
So some organizations have them together. I unfortunately can't say all of them have prevented things from happening, even though they were working on the same team. What I do as part of my job is to actually try and bring those different units together, because there's value in privacy. The lawyers can interpret the law. They understand who's who. That privacy usually has a ton of visibility that the security team doesn't. Even within my own organization, I talk to the privacy team because they actually understand who the big players are, who the legal players are. The crisis management process is always seems to include privacy, but security seems to be an oversight. This year, I do see a lot more amalgamation between the two. That's kind of my big thing. Is I hope this year is a real big integration between the two services, because something that the privacy people will usually say is privacy cannot be done without security. The part that security says is, security can't always be done without privacy, because security is all about collecting information. Privacy needs security to adhere to its requirements, right? So there's a lot, like privacy is always on board, from my experience, to at least have those discussions. It's just finding the right person that's a challenge. Hopefully that answers your question, yeah. Any other questions? Was this of value? Was this helpful? Just overall? Yeah. Did it provide some insights? I mean, each one of those technologies could... Oh, sorry. Yes.
I have a question. I don't think there's a mic, but I'll try to speak loud enough. I think everybody in the room, probably understands the importance of security and privacy. But what are some of the key points you can share with us to ensure that business understands the value of having security, besides threatening them about the breaches that we can potentially have? Because it's a hard sell to the business.
So I tried to not include all of the fear part, except for my first slide. Other than that, I tried to stay away from it. But the conversations, even from, to be open, even from a vendor standpoint, isn't about the speeds and feeds anymore, right? There's a lot of vendors who have speeds and feeds out there. It's the business value. So what value do you bring to the organization? Even when I was working at a retailer, actually a few retailers, it's all about how do we speak the business language. It's the business value. It's not just we're providing security operations to monitor logs. It's we're assisting to detect compliance or SOX deviations or alerts. That's the business value, right? We're aligning with SOX. CISOs, CEOs understand SOX because there's jail involved with that. So it's more about they care about that. And it's really just understanding the business really helps translate those conversations. It's not, again, not technical. It's what's your business and how can I help you. So me as a software vendor, it's the same story as the security internally, the same business units. We work with teams to provide the ROI and the cost. So there's three things basically. Either your components, your cost reduction component, or your risk mitigation, right? And speaking those three things, and then maybe one line to explain how you enable that is really the value that we see. Security, generally not a revenue generator, although as a software vendor, some of the technology we provide secures data to have analytics performed and thereby driving further revenue, right? So that's kind of the sales pitch. But the cost reduction, data governance, understanding your data, identifying 70% cost reduction because that data is redundant, it's outdated, it's not needed. That's something the business would care about. And then risk mitigation, of course, it's usually a compliance-related conversation. PIPEDA, and that's where privacy comes into play. Hopefully that helps. Yeah. And I think I lost my train of thought, so unless there's any more questions. Cool. Well, thank you very much for your time.